It was a normal Friday afternoon, and the office cafeteria was filled with the sound of talking, laughter, and the clinking of plates. Thomas Reynolds, the CEO of a large company, stood in line waiting for his lunch. He wore a simple suit today, trying to blend in with the other workers. It had been a busy morning full of meetings, and he was looking forward to a quiet meal before his next appointment. As Thomas picked up a plate of sandwiches and a fresh salad, he noticed a young woman standing near the edge of the room. She wore a plain blue uniform and held a small cleaning cart. Her name tag read Emily. She seemed nervous, shifting from one foot to the other, her eyes darting toward the table where leftover food from an executive meeting was being packed away. After a few moments, Emily gathered her courage and walked over to Thomas. She spoke softly, her voice almost lost in the noise of the cafeteria. "Excuse me, sir," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "Would it be all right if I took some of the leftover food?" Thomas was taken by surprise. In all his years running the company, no one had ever made such a request. Many employees took food when it was offered, but no one had ever asked for leftovers in such a careful, respectful way. He paused for a moment, then smiled kindly and nodded. "Of course," he said. "Please take whatever you need." Emily gave a small, grateful smile and hurried over to the table. She carefully selected a few sandwiches and pieces of fruit, placing them gently into a brown paper bag she carried. She did not take more than what seemed reasonable. Thomas watched her, feeling a mix of curiosity and something else he could not name, a tug at his heart. As he sat down to eat, he found he could not focus on his food. His mind kept drifting back to Emily. There was something about the way she asked, the way she handled herself, that stayed with him. She did not seem like someone simply looking for a free meal. There was a story behind those careful movements and quiet words. When lunch ended, Thomas made a quick decision. He packed up his things and, without being noticed, followed Emily at a distance. He felt a little foolish. After all, he was a busy man with meetings waiting for him. But something told him this was important. Emily left the building through a side door and walked down the street. She moved quickly, her head down, clutching the brown paper bag close to her side. Thomas kept a good distance, not wanting to scare her. He felt like an explorer, stepping into a story he didn't fully understand yet. What he did not know was that the choice he made that afternoon would change both their lives forever. Thomas walked behind Emily for several blocks, keeping a good distance. The busy streets of downtown slowly faded behind them, and soon they were walking through quieter, older parts of the city. Emily moved quickly, her pace steady but purposeful, as if she had somewhere important to be. Thomas couldn't help but wonder where she was going. The lunchroom was full of people who worked for the company, and yet Emily seemed to have a life outside of work that he knew nothing about. He had never seen her speak to anyone in the office in a way that suggested she had any particular friends or connections. She always appeared so focused on her work, so quiet and professional, yet now seeing her out of the office, Thomas felt there was much more to her story than he had ever realized. As they walked down the street, Thomas saw Emily nod at a few people passing by. An older woman at a street vendor's cart smiled and waved, calling out her name. "Hey, Emily, how have you been?" she said cheerfully. Emily smiled back, a soft and warm expression on her face, but she didn't stop to chat. She simply waved in return and continued on her way, her footsteps quickening as she moved further into the neighborhood. Thomas felt a little out of place, standing on the edge of the sidewalk, watching this quiet exchange. It was clear that Emily was known here, in this part of town, but Thomas couldn't figure out why. The buildings around him began to change. The towering glass office buildings and shiny cars gave way to smaller, older homes, their paint chipped and worn from years of weathering. The sidewalks were cracked, and the air smelled faintly of food from the nearby corner store. This was a part of the city Thomas rarely visited. Most of the people in his office lived in upscale areas, and they rarely spoke of places like this. Emily kept walking until she reached a small building tucked between two larger ones. The building was old, with peeling paint and a sign above the door that read, "Hope Community Center." It wasn't much to look at, but Thomas could sense the life within. Emily opened the door and stepped inside, disappearing from view. Curious, Thomas took a few steps forward, his heart beating a little faster. He wasn't sure what he expected to find, but something told him this was where Emily truly belonged. Not in the cafeteria where she had worked as a cleaner, but here in this humble place where it seemed she had a purpose. He waited for a moment then, feeling a mix of hesitation and determination. He quietly approached the door and peered inside through a small window. What he saw made his heart ache. Inside, Emily was surrounded by children. There were at least a dozen of them, sitting in a circle, playing games, and laughing. Emily was talking to them, handing out pieces of food from the bag she had carefully carried. Thomas could see how the children looked up to her. Some of them had no shoes, their clothes worn and patched, but their eyes were bright with excitement as they gathered around her. Thomas watched in silence, realizing that the woman he had seen every day at work was doing something far more important than anything he had imagined. Thomas stood still, his breath quiet, as he watched Emily interact with the children inside the community center. The warmth in the room was almost visible. He could see how carefully she spoke to each child, making sure they each got a piece of food and a kind word. She bent down to their level when they needed her attention, and the children responded with bright smiles and laughter. It was as if the whole world outside this building didn't matter. Inside, there was only care and understanding. Thomas felt a strange mix of admiration and guilt. He had known Emily for months now, seen her work diligently at the company, but he had never known she was doing something so meaningful outside of the office. She wasn't just someone who cleaned the cafeteria or took out the trash. She was a hero to these kids, someone they relied on, someone they looked up to. But why had she never mentioned this before? Why hadn't she shared anything about this other life with anyone at work? His thoughts were interrupted when he saw one of the children, a small boy with messy hair and a ripped shirt, run up to Emily, his eyes wide with excitement. "Miss Emily, I finished my drawing," he shouted, holding up a piece of paper with colorful scribbles. Emily smiled down at him, her face lighting up with pride. "That's beautiful, Sammy," she said, her voice warm and full of encouragement. "You've done such a good job. Keep it up." The child beamed, clearly thrilled to receive her praise. Thomas watched, amazed by how Emily made every child feel special, even with the simplest of gestures. She had the power to make them feel seen and valued, something that not everyone was able to do, especially not in places like this. The room was filled with laughter and chatter as Emily continued to help the children with their activities. Thomas found himself looking around the community center. The walls were covered with drawings and posters, many of them colorful, some messy, but all showing the creativity of the children. In the corner, a small table had snacks set out, and on the shelves were toys and books that had clearly been donated. This was a place where children could come to play, learn, and most importantly, feel safe. Thomas leaned against the wall, unsure of what to do next. He was tempted to walk away, to leave Emily to do her work, but something inside him told him he needed to stay. He needed to understand more, to see more of this world that Emily had been a part of for so long. He had been so caught up in his own life, in the busy world of business and deadlines, that he had never even thought about what was happening just a few blocks away from his office. He stood there for what felt like hours, watching Emily. The more he observed, the more he realized how much he had taken for granted in his own life. He had plenty of food, a comfortable home, a successful career. But there were so many people out there, like these children, who didn't have the same opportunities. Emily was not just giving them food, she was giving them hope. Finally, as the sun began to set, Thomas knew it was time to leave. But as he turned to go, he made a silent promise to himself. He would do something to help. He would find a way to give back, to make a difference in the lives of people like Emily, who were doing so much with so little. The next week, Thomas couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen at the community center. It was always in the back of his mind, reminding him of how much he had taken for granted. He had decided that he needed to make a change, not just for himself, but for others. Emily's quiet, selfless actions had inspired him to do something bigger than he had ever done before. One afternoon, Thomas walked into the community center. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew he had to start somewhere. The moment he stepped inside, he was greeted by the sounds of children playing and laughing. Emily was sitting at a table with a small group of kids, helping them with their homework. She looked up in surprise when she saw Thomas standing at the door. "Oh, Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice filled with confusion. "What are you doing here?" Thomas smiled and walked inside. "I wanted to see for myself," he said. "What you're doing here. It's amazing. I I didn't realize how important this place was." Emily seemed a little uncomfortable, but she gestured for him to sit down. "It's just a small community center," she explained. "We try to help where we can." "It's more than that," Thomas said, his voice sincere. "You're doing something really special for these kids. I want to help." Emily was quiet for a moment, unsure of what to say. She had always kept her work here separate from her life at the office, not wanting to mix the two worlds. But Thomas's words made her pause. She could see that he wasn't just offering empty help. There was a genuine interest in his eyes. "I don't know what you can do," she said slowly. "This is just a small place. We don't need much." "Don't sell yourself short," Thomas replied. "I've seen the difference you're making here, and I want to help it grow." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. She had no idea how he could help, but she wasn't about to turn down any offer of assistance. "Well, there's always a need for more food and supplies," she said quietly. "We rely on donations from the community, but it's never enough. The kids could really use more support." Thomas nodded, already thinking of ways he could help. He had connections, resources, and a company that could lend a hand. But beyond that, he had learned something important. Sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest impact. He wanted to provide more than just donations. He wanted to make sure the center had the support it needed to keep growing and reaching more children. "I'll make some calls," he said. "We can get you the food and supplies you need, and I'll see what we can do to help with funding too." Emily looked at him, her expression a mix of disbelief and gratitude. "You really want to help us?" "Yes," Thomas said, his voice firm. "You're doing something that matters. It's time others saw that too." That afternoon, Thomas left the community center with a promise to do everything he could to help. He knew he couldn't do it alone, but he also knew that with Emily's dedication and his resources, they could make a real difference. For the first time in a long time, Thomas felt like he was on the path to something that truly mattered, something beyond just business. Over the next few weeks, Thomas worked tirelessly behind the scenes to help the community center. He used his connections to secure donations of food, school supplies, and clothing for the children. He also reached out to his company's partners, asking them to contribute whatever they could. Slowly, the center began to fill with boxes of donations, each one a small step toward providing more for the kids who depended on Emily and the others there. Emily watched this transformation with a mix of surprise and gratitude. At first, she had been skeptical. She didn't think Thomas could make much of a difference. After all, how could someone from a high-powered business world really understand the needs of a small community center like hers? But as the weeks passed, she saw how genuine his efforts were. He wasn't just sending money or supplies. He was showing up, asking questions, and truly listening to what the center needed. One afternoon, Thomas visited the center with a large truck full of donations. The children were outside playing when he arrived, and Emily was organizing some materials in a back room. When she saw him walk in, she couldn't help but smile. "You really did it," she said, a note of wonder in her voice. "I couldn't have done it without you," Thomas replied, his face serious but pleased. "You've been doing the real work here. I just helped make sure you had what you needed." As they unloaded the truck together, Emily couldn't help but notice how much more efficient the center had become with all the new resources. There were more books for the kids to read, more art supplies for their creative projects, and enough food to ensure no one would go hungry. Thomas had also helped set up a small computer lab in the back room, allowing the children to access educational programs and learn important skills for their future. By the time the truck was empty, Emily felt a deep sense of relief. She had always worked hard to provide the best she could for the kids, but now, with Thomas's help, the center could truly grow and offer even more to the children who needed it most. "Thank you," Emily said, her voice full of emotion. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." Thomas shrugged, his usual businesslike demeanor softening. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "It's the least I can do. What you're doing here is incredible, and it deserves to be supported." Over time, the center grew stronger. More volunteers began to come in to help with the children, and the local community started to take notice of what was happening. Thanks to Thomas' efforts, the center had more stability, and the children had access to better resources. Emily was able to focus more on her work with the kids, knowing that the center was in good hands. As Thomas visited the center regularly, he couldn't help but feel proud. He had been a part of something far bigger than anything he had done in his business life. He had helped create a place where children could feel safe, loved, and encouraged to reach their full potential. It was a different kind of success, one that left him feeling fulfilled in a way he had never experienced before. As the weeks went by, the community center continued to thrive. With Thomas's support, Emily was able to focus more on her role as a mentor and leader for the children. The new programs they had introduced, such as after-school tutoring, art classes, and fitness activities, became a huge success. Children who had once struggled to keep up in school now had the tools and encouragement they needed to excel. The atmosphere at the center was filled with energy and hope. One afternoon, as Emily was setting up a new lesson for the kids, Thomas walked into the center, his arms full of books and educational materials. "We just got some new supplies," he said, setting the boxes down with a smile. "These should help with the new tutoring program you're starting." "Thank you," Emily replied, her voice full of appreciation. "I don't know how we could have done it without you. The kids love the new activities, and we've seen so much improvement in just a short time." Thomas nodded, clearly pleased to hear that things were going so well. He had seen the changes himself, but hearing Emily talk about it made him feel even more proud of what they had accomplished together. It wasn't just about donating money or materials anymore. It was about the lasting impact they were making on these children's lives. As the center continued to grow, so did the sense of community around it. More and more people started to get involved, volunteering their time and skills to help. Some of Thomas's colleagues even came by to donate their time or resources, and Emily was amazed at how quickly the word spread about the good work they were doing. One evening, as Thomas was preparing to leave the center, Emily approached him with a quiet look of gratitude on her face. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened over the past few months," she said. "It's incredible how much the center has changed. But more than that, it's incredible how much I've learned from you. I've always done my best to help these kids, but now I can see that there's more to it. There's a way to bring people together, to make sure the help we're giving is sustainable." Thomas looked at her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "It's not just about giving money or supplies, is it?" he said. "It's about creating opportunities, about changing lives in a way that lasts. I think you've already known that, Emily. You've been doing that for years." "Maybe," she said, "but I never had the kind of resources you've brought in. With your help, we've been able to do so much more than I ever imagined." Thomas smiled. "You're the one who made this happen, Emily. I just helped give it a push." As they stood there, surrounded by the laughter and chatter of the children playing outside, both of them knew that the journey was far from over. There was still much work to be done, but the future was brighter than ever. They had started something meaningful, and together, they were going to make sure it continued to grow and reach even more children in need. Months passed, and the community center became a well-known place in the neighborhood. Word spread about the positive changes happening there, and more families started to take part in the programs. Children who had once been shy and withdrawn now looked forward to coming every day. The center was more than just a place to stay after school. It had become a safe space, a place where every child felt valued. One day, Emily walked into the center early in the morning to find Thomas already there, talking to some of the volunteers. He had taken it upon himself to help organize a fundraiser for the center, something that had never been done before. The idea was to bring the community together, not just for donations, but to celebrate the progress they had all made. "Hey, Thomas," Emily called out as she approached him. "What are you planning now?" Thomas turned around with a smile. "Good morning, Emily. I'm just getting things ready for the event next month. We're hoping to raise enough money to keep the programs going and expand them even more." Emily raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You really think the community will come together for something like this?" "I'm sure of it," Thomas replied confidently. "You've done amazing work here, and people are starting to notice. This fundraiser will show them how much this center means to everyone." Over the next few weeks, the preparations for the event began to take shape. Thomas and Emily worked side by side, reaching out to local businesses, organizing activities, and promoting the event to the community. There was a sense of excitement in the air as the day approached. Volunteers and parents chipped in, helping to decorate the space and set up everything that would be needed. Finally, the day of the fundraiser arrived. The center was transformed, tables were lined with food, banners displayed the success of the center's programs, and local musicians played in the corner. The atmosphere was filled with energy and laughter, and everyone seemed to be in good spirits. It was more than just a fundraiser. It was a celebration of the hard work and dedication that had brought the community together. People from all over the neighborhood came to show their support. Some donated money, others volunteered their time, and many simply came to enjoy the festivities. As Emily looked around at the crowd, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with gratitude. She had never imagined that the center would grow to this extent. It was more than just a place for the kids. It had become a beacon of hope for the whole community. Thomas was standing nearby, talking to a group of donors. He had been busy all day, but his face lit up when he saw Emily watching him from across the room. He gave her a nod of approval, and she smiled back. They had come a long way since their first conversation in the center, and now they were seeing the results of all their hard work. As the event continued into the evening, Emily realized how much had changed in just a few months. The center was no longer just a place that needed help. It was a thriving, vital part of the community, thanks to the effort of so many people. She knew that this was just the beginning, and she felt more determined than ever to continue making a difference in the lives of the children who needed it most. As the months went on, the community center became a vital part of the neighborhood. Emily and Thomas continued working together, always finding new ways to improve the programs and reach even more children. The center was now full of opportunities. There were more tutoring sessions, new sports activities, and a library where kids could read and study. Emily was able to offer scholarships for children who needed extra support, and parents often stopped by to express their gratitude for the positive changes they had seen in their children. One afternoon, Thomas visited the center, as he often did. He was always pleased to see how things were progressing, but today he had something special to share. When Emily walked into the main room, she was surprised to see a group of people from a local news station. They had come to film a segment about the center and the impact it had made on the community. Thomas was standing by the entrance, talking to the reporters. "Emily, this is a big moment," Thomas said with a grin. "The center is getting recognized for all the great work you've been doing here." Emily was taken aback. She had never expected this kind of attention. "I didn't know we were going to be featured on the news," she said, a little nervously. "Don't worry," Thomas reassured her. "You've earned it. The whole community should know what a difference you've made." The reporter spent the afternoon interviewing Emily, the volunteers, and some of the children who attended the center. It was a proud moment for everyone involved. Emily, who had always been shy about the attention, couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. She had worked hard for years to make the center a place where children could grow, learn, and find support. Now people outside the neighborhood were beginning to notice. As the filming wrapped up, Thomas walked over to Emily, who was watching the reporters pack up their equipment. "This is just the beginning," he said. "With all the attention the center is getting, we can do even more for these kids. There are more people